Glad to see all of you. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are on the map. My name is Eric Lang, and so you know where I am on the map. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been giving this presentation or different versions of it since 2013, and a lot has changed along the way, but I've learned one thing. I need to give the following trigger warning. I'm going to talk about suicide, which is upsetting. I'm going to talk about my suicide attempt, which is less upsetting since it really didn't work. But I'm going to talk about them in a way that you might not be used to. We've heard of stigma surrounding the topics of mental illness, mental disorder, mental health, suicide, and there certainly is. And one of my beliefs is that talking about these issues in hushed tones contributes to the stigma. We are walking away from them, and I believe that injecting just very real world, a smirk here and there doesn't hurt and in fact helps. If that is offensive to any of you, and experience indicates 10%. I apologize in advance. It is not my place to offend. It is my place to educate, inform, and share, really. Uh, when you get me, you get three different people with three differing perspectives. The first is what I would call the policy wonk perspective. I've spent a great deal of time and energy evaluating data with respect to our profession and mental health and mental disorder. That person asks, what should we be doing? The second person you get is the ethics nerd. I have, as you'll learn, had the need to live through the rules and the need to learn them as a lawyer who represents other attorneys with mental disorder issues in the ethics process. And so I track them very closely, as well as controversies in those rules that we'll talk about. Third, and which informs all of this, I've lived this, period. I did not know I had bipolar disorder when I tried to kill myself in 2012. One of the first clues was when the therapist in the special hospital that you go to after you try to kill yourself asked me, have you thought about suicide before yesterday? And my response was, you mean aside from the normal thoughts that people have about living or dying every day? Her look sort of told me that perhaps I had a problem. And perhaps there were things going on in my mind that I should walk away from it and need to learn about. I didn't know that. One of the bad effects of bipolar disorder, especially mania, is that you believe that you are Superman, and any problem you have, you can fix without needing to inform or rely on others. And that causes you, well, I don't want to say cause because the responsibility is with you, not with your condition. That causes you to, or correlates with unethical behavior. And I did some things I ought not to have done and was given a mandatory vacation, that's my euphemism, for a couple of years, during which time I was able to get my mental health together and a few other things and come back to the profession in 2015. But I've lived all of this, and my experience is what informs a lot of what I say. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist. So, with no further ado, let's see if I can make this do what it's supposed to do. Click here, and click one more there. Everyone got it? I hope. Um, so, going beyond fear and addressing mental health is how I have, the last couple of years, characterized the issue. The fear comes from listening to numbers that may be outsized. The fear comes from, can I come out, for lack of a better phrase, if I have these issues? And I'm exploring how you can get past that. The topics I'm going to cover relate one to the areas of expertise. What is is there a mental health crisis is the policy discussion. What are the ethical responsibilities is obviously the ethics discussion. And addressing and recognizing these concerns is the human discussion, dealing with people who have these issues as something other than lawyers who have to deal with ethics rules. I've got time at the end. I've got three hypotheticals I like to go through. I'm going to try to take questions as I finish each of the first three, so that if you've got a question that's relevant to, is there a crisis, I can deal with that up front as opposed to dealing with it, 40 minutes past when it was relevant. So, is there a mental health crisis? Your first trivia question is, what's the album cover on the left hand? That's Supertramp's Crisis, What Crisis? And that becomes the thematic question. Is there a problem? Is there a crisis? What are we looking at? What we have to realize as we evaluate crisis or problem is what we do is not easy. I think everyone would agree with that, but we've known that for a decent time. When did it get this way? There was a guy at the founding of his nation who took it upon himself to pass, enact, discuss, and know all of the laws and be the sole one who shared these things with everyone. He was discussing this with his father in law, and his father in law said, "Don't do this. This will wear you out, and it's not good for the people either." In a room, I'll ask you how far back that goes. Most people will guess somewhere in the hundreds of years. But the real answer is a couple thousand years ago. This is what Moses was told when he was the sole lawgiver. Now, you may believe that story is true, you may not, but it's certainly one that's been written down for thousands of years and one worth considering in determining whether our profession is a difficult one. Your more recent and more quoted version of this is Dean Prosser's comment about distasteful things for distasteful people. Yeah, my writing is not straight at all. Um, but this too rings true. What we do is hard. And it's important to know that what we do is hard because, oh, back one, because at the end of the day, if something is hard, it puts extra stress on you. I have asthma. If I go out in the spring and there's pollen all around the world, or I go out on the first cold day of winter, my lungs will close up. I need to know what environments are hard for me and when I have to have my emergency medicine with me and how I have to act in those circumstances. Law is like that too, not for the lungs, not for the blood, but for the brain. What do we mean when we talk about mental health and mental disorder? Generally, I'm not defining any one particular aspect of it. The psychiatrists have this. It's the Diagnostical Statistical Manual. I'm one version too old, but one's all I need. And you can read it if you want one day, but it's complicated. The legislators are even worse. We've got 50 state legislatures in the company. We've got a bunch of, in the country. We've got a bunch of federal administrative agencies that I hold on that identify mental health issues, and they're all over the place. One version of this presentation has a really a 10-minute jag on antiquated statutes and statutes that contradict themselves. In Georgia, our statute says you are mentally ill if you have a mental illness. They're all over the board. I've come up with, and let me be clear, first person singular, I've come up with something that's useful for me. I'm not quoting anyone on this. I'm not saying that this is acceptable. I'm saying it works for me when I analyze the problem. Three-part discussion. You're doing something significantly out of place in the environment. It's not voluntary that you're doing it, and it's not a reasonable reaction to an outside stimulation. What does that mean? So, out of place behavior, intentional, stimulated. This guy walks into the room. These are, you'll trust me on this, three different people. Two of them are just fine mentally. One of them has a condition. You can't tell by looking which one is which. There's just no way. Well, our first guy here, His family was in a horrible car crash, and he's running into you, asking for help, asking for money, asking for your car so he can get them to the hospital. Is his behavior intentional or reaction? His behavior is not intentional. It's what he's doing in the moment. Is it a normal response to an outside stimulation? Yes, he's fine. I mean, he's not fine. His family was in a horrible car crash, but in terms of mental illness, he is fine. Our next guy, he's a con artist. He's coming in to tell you that his family was in a horrible car crash. His actions are intentional and are not a normal response to an outside stimulus. He's a bad guy, but he's not necessarily, for these reasons, possessing a mental disorder. Our third guy's acting this way because that's just the way he acts. He isn't acting intentionally and is acting in a stimulated fashion. So, who are we talking about statistically? And here's where we get into a little bit of numbers. We are talking about 100% of the population that breaks into two groups. The first group here, 78%, which I'll sometimes refer to as 80%, who have no mental illness. These numbers come from the National Institutes of Mental Health. Their moments of stress are within bounds. If their dog dies, they're going to be sad. It doesn't mean they're depressed. That leaves 22% who have any mental illness, all the way to that last 5% who have a serious mental illness, mental disorder condition. Now, not all these people are the same. Some disorders are worse than other disorders, and we'll break that down. Isolated anxiety, isolated panic is a disorder. No one should say, oh, you're just feeling that way. But it's not as bad as others. We're not as challenging as others to deal with. Now let's make that anxiety a little bit more frequent, or have isolated heightened issues like depression or mania. You're getting more towards serious, but you're still in that area of not as serious. Now, my group, frequent depression and or mania, bipolar disorder, we're pushing right up against serious. I'll use me as the example. I don't use others. I am, on the one hand, have that diagnosis. On the other, I have a hearty breakfast of 8 or 9 pills every day that keep things in check. And on the other hand, I do have suicide issues that haven't really presented themselves since 2012. So that pushes right up towards the line, but doesn't cross it. And then finally, we've got those folks who have disabling conditions. And I'll leave it at that, because when you start describing those conditions, you end up using words that people don't want you to use. So this is our group, 80 and 20. 80 and 20, remember those concepts. Who's talking about these groups? Your first group of those talking are paid consultants. These are people who have done who have said many things about our profession in an effort to get hired by law firms, institutions, et cetera, to help address those issues. First, let me be clear, I'm a capitalist. Second, I'm a lawyer. I get paid to solve problems I identify. I have no issue with the existence of paid consultants or the jobs they do, but what they say is somewhat tainted by what their objectives are. They are usually, I'll say, in league with concerned volunteers, people with no connection to those with mental illness directly, but who want to be helpful. Again, these are good people, but their information is aligned with the paid consultants. Your last two groups, connected volunteers and those who live it, are your smallest groups. How small? So I'm a lawyer, I'm practicing, and I have said I tried to kill myself. The number of other lawyers who have said that is less than 10. I think by last count it's 7. And 6 of us all look like me. There's a just people don't want to come out and say it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's go on to what's being said. And Mike, if you're listening now, would be a good time to put up the results of the first question. We've got things like this is a crisis of the profession. This, we are in a crisis. How do I get the results, Mike? I only have the question.
Yeah, I just put the question up.
Oh, okay. Addressing the suicide. We see the word crisis left, right, up, and down. Where suicide ranks in terms of deaths of lawyers and so on and so forth. These are the words that initially caused me to title my law review article and this presentation Going Beyond Fear. 99% of what is written about attorney mental health has to do with there's a crisis, there's a problem, there's a fear. And they quote statistics that are just scary. Let's look at whether these statistics are right. Mike, can you put results up? Yeah, y'all are going to be surprised. So we know how many attorneys commit suicide. The CDC collects death certificates from, I think at last count was 39 states around the country. And the bottom of the standard death certificate says cause of death. And 3 lines above that says occupation while alive. So we have a decent idea of what the data is. And what's the data? On the average, 32 per 100,000 employees generally take their own lives, 20 for male lawyers. For females, it's 8 and 8. If you picked roughly the same, that's 11% of you. You were right. If you said higher and much higher, you should be pleasantly surprised. This is good news. Who is above average? I'm going to show you the answer in a moment. You're going to say, well, of course. It's the people who work hard for a living. We think hard, we're stressed, but try being a coal miner. Your highest numbers are those difficult, outside, over and over again professions. And I'm not knocking the suicide rate that attorneys have, but I am saying if there's a crisis, it's a general crisis, not one that is focused on our industry. So again, good news, and one that should take down the fear level a little. Now you might say, well, compare us to the non-outside professions. We're still at the lower end, when we look at 20.5 relative to social workers and nurses and so on and so forth. So that is good news, and that should decrease the amount of fear. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to suicide. Are they right about mental disorders? We're all going crazy. No. I can go on for this forever, but just write this down. Eric Lang, Going Beyond Fear, Mercer University. It's a long statistical analysis of all of the state-of-the-art studies of mental disorders in the legal profession, and they all have large sampling issues, missing data, wrong assumptions, and if you know what this means, Bayesian errors that make their data very doubtful. Now I'm going to pull the pin out and go back to suicide, because suicide is important. But it's not important for the reason that we are, quote unquote, led to believe. It's important because of how it relates to other numbers. For every attempt, you're looking at, for every attempt relating to death, you're looking at 24 attempts not. So if there's a successful suicide in our profession, and I know that guy, I know more than one of that guy, there are 24 that aren't, and I'm one of that guy. And I hate to say it, some of you may be as well. Those are the people we can focus on, but there's another group. For every suicide attempt, there's another 240 something folks with serious mental illness, that last 20% group who are in danger. And when we get to the end, talking about what you can do, yeah, I can quibble all day with the numbers. And yeah, I really think folks out there are trying much too hard to tell our profession that we're all going crazy and we're all going to kill ourselves. But at the end of the day, there are people in our profession or everywhere that have problems. We are in a hard profession and we need to, let's say, look out for each other in that regard. I am now going to take questions. Hold on. Q&A, two of them. First one, and I won't give names. How do you count lawyers who are substance abusers who kill themselves that way? I don't know the answer. I deliberately do not talk about substance abuse. It is a horrible, awful thing. In my lawyers group therapy group at the special hospital, 15 of us, we lost 3 in a year and a half due to substance abuse issues. So the I just don't. I stay out of that because it's not my lane. But that's a very good question. Next question: how do I define attempted suicide? What's funny is I had that conversation either last week or the week before with my psychiatrist. I'm going to define it by example for you. If it's late at night and you're feeling like you want to kill yourself, and what you do is you drive down the road with your lights off, that's highly risky behavior, but is not attempted suicide. On the other hand, if you take a bunch of pills, even though, as it turns out, this was my thing, they're not enough, that is attempted suicide. You've got to have the intent and engage in an actual act, as I understand it. So there's another question that just popped in on substance abuse. Again, I will not. That is not my lane, not my expertise, and not my experience. So those are excellent questions. I just can't answer them. All right. Next set of discussions: ethics. This is where we get our this is where we get our hour. The rules when you are the issue. In other words, if you're a lawyer dealing with uh, mental disability issues, what rules are you looking at? First thing you need to know is there are no rules that directly address the issue that I know of, but we're going to come to some proposed stuff in a bit. Your first rule is Rule 1.1, competence. Lawyers shall provide competent representation. Now, we talk about mental competency in other areas of the law, but when this rule's comment talks about competence, it's talking about benefits and risks associated with technology, continuing study, and so on and so forth. You don't have a direct link from Rule 1.1 to mental competence. Rule 1.1.6 goes a little bit further. It's the mandatory withdrawal rule, and you have to withdraw right around. And Mike, if you can put up the next question now, that'd be great. You have to withdraw if your mental condition material impairs your ability to represent the client. Now, note that that doesn't say if you have a mental condition, you have to withdraw. It says if you have a mental condition and it impacts your ability to represent the client, you have to withdraw. So those are the rules we have out there that govern you. If you are thinking about what can I do while I am a lawyer, the rules essentially say so long as you can practice without impairing your client, you're good. What does impairing your client mean? That's where you get interesting. Let's say you're the best lawyer in the world. You get 100 lawyer points. And because of your mental illness, you're now down to 85. You impaired your client? I don't know the answer to that question, but that is certainly one of the ones that gets asked in these areas. Here we're going to get to the controversy. There are two topics out there that are in the community that talks about this. One is, do we need to add something to the rules explicitly dealing with mental health? And the other is, do we need to ask in bar fitness applications whether you have mental health issues? Um, these are not easy questions, and there are folks who would call themselves mental health advocates who will get in heated arguments with other folks who call themselves mental health advocates on these particular issues. I'm going to talk about this a little longer because I've got some personal experience to relate. Mike, if you can put the results up since I'm about to put the answers on the board. All right. Mandating mental health, as I call it. The following proposed comment is out there on the competency rule. Maintaining the mental, emotional, and physical ability necessary for representation of a client is an important aspect of maintaining competence to practice law. That is generally agreed on by this group, overwhelmingly um, agreed on. And I will tell you, when this came out in Georgia, 2019, 2020, there was a big debate over it, and I was on the side of the folks that didn't want this rule. Come back to that. The second controversy concerns the bar application question. Do you need to be, should you disclose some form of mental health issue when you apply? The American Psychological Association says no, and courts and writers are beginning to say no. The bar bureaucracy will have to answer for a medieval approach to mental health that is as cruel as it is counterproductive. That's the way it's going. Now, what's interesting is the people that want the rule change, and this is not true in this group, the people that want the rule change don't think the mental health question should be in the fitness application. The reason is on the putting it on the fitness application creates a more of a stigma, not but having the rule reinforces the importance of mental health. I think regardless of what your opinions are on these, you need to have the same opinion on both of them. If it's important enough to be in the rule, it's important enough to be in the fitness application. Before, I thought, nah, we really shouldn't be asking about this stuff. We really shouldn't focus on this stuff. I'm going to go on to the evolution in my thought. So after I came back, I had to figure out a different way to practice. However, I was practicing before, successes aside, it exploded. And so I had to think through what the best way of continuing might be. Now, I was fortunate. People knew that what happened to me was, we'll call a health issue, and continued to want to work with me. And that was very, very, very fortunate. The problem was I liked doing the hard stuff. I liked the big cases. I was good at the big cases, and I wanted to continue them, but I knew I could not do that 100% of the time. So I came up with the perfect management model for attorneys with mental health disorder. I called it the 50-50 model. Half the work you do, green light stuff, is working smaller matters, working for other lawyers and their clients, et cetera, et cetera. If I did that 100% of the time, I would not be satisfied with the work I was doing, and would not like my job as much and would have to find something else to do. So 50% was my prescription for good mental health. The other 50% is the stuff I like. Lead counsel on large cases for direct clients. Okay, that worked just fine. The problem is that was the fantasy management model for attorneys with mental health disorders. There were two problems with the model. Problem one, time doesn't work that way. I could generally say over the course of a year, a 50-50 system works. Over the course of a quarter, still feel pretty confident. But once we get down to a month, a week, or a day, it doesn't work. If I'm in court in a 2-week trial, I can't during week one say, Your Honor, I got to go from this yellow week to this green week, because that doesn't work. Can't do that. That's the smaller problem. The bigger problem is the third 50%. The red stuff that I just didn't plan for enough. Obviously, you always have something in there for what could go wrong, but I didn't plan for this enough. This was a year for me. Started off with a large case, really large case exploding, and my co-lead counsel quitting. So what was a case on the yellow-green line became firmly yellow. We'll make that sort of red. Right after that explosion, I had two personal health problems, let's just say of an organ variety, that slowed me down and created, had some stress with them. Let's make the red bigger. Then right after that, the same large case re-explodes. Then right after that, someone in my family had a major health problem, disabling them for a few months. Then right at the same time and a little bit after, my father went into the, okay, I'm going to die now, and spent 3 months going through that process. And then another family member had an issue dealing with hospitalization. I needed to be out of town for that. Now, we all have problems. None of them are an excuse to not practice law, the highest ethical and professional standards. Period. End of sentence. But trust me when I say that these stressors have a greater impact on someone at the far end of the mental health spectrum than they do someone at the 78% of the spectrum. And all this had me thinking about whether this mattered from a rule sense. Well, then something happened, not something happened. We've got system overload. And what do I mean by system overload? Smaller case in there, missed a deadline, tried to deal with it without telling anybody, which is just a marvelous, marvelous idea, right? I couldn't fix it despite Mania telling me that I could, and surprise, that's as good an idea as not telling anybody. I told others before it was totally irreparable. Carrier paid the client in full, even though the underlying litigation is still going on. In other words, that particular issue, I got out, I got replaced, carrier played the client, all that kind of stuff. Ethics, however, is not no harm, no foul. I should have revealed the issue, and although the client didn't suffer dollar harm, it could have. I did wrong for the client, I did wrong by the system, but what's my responsibility? I can't change the past, I could address it through coverage, but I can change the future. So I've rejiggered the reds, the greens, and the yellows, taken on less heavy stuff, more light stuff, and leaving more blank space in my schedule, and committed to that. Is that going to fix it? I don't know. But how does this come back to the controversies? In a very simple fashion. If the bar is going to be dealing with lawyers like me in a fashion other than we just can't have people with mental health disorders in the profession, the bar's got to know more about you, and the bar's got to have something to point to in the rules as opposed to merely the violation that's out there. The good news for folks like me is that mental health is a mitigating factor in discipline. It is not a liability issue. It's okay, you did wrong, but before we disbar you, let us see what happens. Indeed, back in 2012, before the suicide attempt, I'd already self-reported the issues. It was the bar that said, we know Eric, we know he does this, that, and the other. He's got a mental health issue that he doesn't realize. This is the important stuff. Now, your next movie trivia. This is Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His strategy, if you don't know the movie, was to pretend that he had issues and get institutionalized instead of put in jail, because pretending to be insane he thought was a better idea. And maybe lawyers are going to be out there trying to do that. No. If you read opinions, you'll see there are plenty of lawyers and plenty of courts that have flagged, hey, this guy might have a problem, but he's not admitting to it. But beyond that, I've got a real experience. The ABA asked me to write an article about my suicide experiences, returning from the nearly dead. But it was to be put into this book. And although I don't have a he, him written next to my name, you may assume that I don't fit into her story. Why? The person who put the book together said, we tried to get women to write about this, but we couldn't. We found the guy who could. There just aren't people writing about this issue because they're afraid to correctly identify as someone with issues. Now, does that mean there aren't female lawyers who haven't attempted? Absolutely not. I know of one, and I've been trying to get her to talk about it because I feel so unqualified on the issue when I talk to people dealing with different issues. And she said, and I'm not going to quote her completely, she won't do it because she fears that she'll be identified as that crazy bee. And those were, well, almost her words. And I understand it. I understand it. I've had 3 different lawyers in a courtroom try to get me to react. And they are 0-3 in front of the judge and in front of the jury. I'm going to talk about the rules when someone else is the issue, but I'm going to go relatively quickly because I see where I am on time. Rule 8.3 talks about whether you have to report a rules violation. It's a knowing requirement. It's not a believes or think requirement. Some states don't even impose a disciplinary penalty. The standards have to give reasonable assurance that people comply with the rules. If you have direct supervisory authority, you have to make reasonable efforts. If you know of the conduct, you have to take reasonable remedial action. The comment, again, reasonable efforts. Old ABA opinions, they don't have a new one yet. When mental impairment is known, you've got duties to prevent violation of the rules. Violations must be reported, and there might be a client disclosure requirement. And the fact that you fired the lawyer doesn't change your obligations. You have to, if you have a belief of a mental condition, if potential that that person is representing clients, and a belief that raises questions of fitness, you have to report possible rule violations under these ABA opinions. They're opinions, they're old, they're from before the time where we started talking about mental health, and they are not necessarily implemented at the state levels. All right, let's talk about some questions. If you knew or should have known that mental health struggles were affecting your daily function, could you be found to have committed malpractice for failure to adequately represent a client if mental health was the cause of malpractice? Or is mental health a defense to the malpractice? I'm going to give you a answer that may be a little incomplete. Your elements of malpractice relate to committing the malpractice. And so if I'm going to give an awful example, but people understand it. If I'm a drunk driver and I make it home okay, I have driven drunk and I have done a bad thing, but I haven't caused damage. If I am bad in the head, but still win the motion, we're an outcome-driven profession. Now, the question is, I lost the motion and why did I lose it? If I missed the deadline, I missed the deadline. And that's going to be malpractice. The only thing that I could think the mental health might be a defense to are, if they're available in your jurisdiction, punitive or exemplary damages coming out of the tort. But I think it's going to come down to the tort itself. Do I commit malpractice if I stop taking lithium for a month? Well, I get a bad headache, but unless I commit malpractice, I don't think I've committed malpractice. I hope that uses. If the new rules adopted, is there a provision to provide mental health treatment so that the individual can practice law competently? In Georgia, we have an excellent lawyer's assistance program. We get 6 free sessions a year with a therapist. And so, though no one can make you do anything, it's available. I can't speak to other jurisdictions. I do know the potential rule that I've quoted doesn't contain that provision. So I would hope that if someone had identified to them a mental health issue, that they wouldn't need to be required by someone else to seek treatment. If someone told me that I had a bad skin cancer on my back that I couldn't see, one would hope that I would go to a dermatologist. Okay, next one. Thoughts of effect on litigation versus non-litigation on mental health. How can solo practitioners who need to step away manage that? First one, remember I said there's bad data out there? There's bad data out there. The studies that talk about it are extrapolating from endpoints that don't really mix. And then what do you do with the general practitioner who does both? So I can see where there might be a difference, but I can't fully see. Let's say you are a mortgage loan closing attorney, and what you do, a residential, and what you do therefore is what you do is residential. And that might be repetitive and therefore, strain you. How can solo practitioners who need to step away manage that? You just you need to have a network. You need to give away cases. You need to take less cases. You need to take fewer cases. I have found that in instances where I know I've been under it, calling opposing counsel and saying, look, we've got 5 months left in the discovery period. Can we lay low for 2 weeks? Tends to be well reacted to. Yeah. In Ohio, I feel like there's a difference between liability for malpractice and whether you'll be disbarred. Yes, that is true completely. If you have a mental health issue, I think it affects whether you keep your license, but not liability for malpractice. Right result? Well, I'll go to the prior sentence. It's not whether you have a mental health condition. Um, it's whether you ignore your mental health condition and don't take steps to address it that relates to licensure. I would opine, um, and as opposed to the liability for malpractice. Is that the right result? Again, I think that to me, if I were writing the standard, it would be: are you continuing to take actions that addressed past issues? But I'm not those people. All right, so let us move on. Caring about someone else. We've now left being a lawyer, so to speak, being an ethical lawyer and being a professional lawyer, being a moral lawyer, being a person. And so let me click here. What do you look for in someone else? How can you tell someone else is suffering? If you Googled that, or if you pulled an ABA guide on that, or pulled your state bar's guide on that, you would get an answer like this. If someone's got a depressed mood, a loss of interest, et cetera, impulsiveness, risk taking, this is true. Everything on this slide is true. And you have very little chance of seeing any of it or enough of it to make a judgment. I've got a different list that I put together from other people who have a different list. I'll back up and tell a story. If you want to kill yourself, you want to kill yourself. It's before you want to kill yourself that intervention matters. Once you've crossed the line, when I crossed the line, an eerie calm came over. I went to the office. I had 5 or 6 people working for me at the time. Went into my office, poured my glass of vodka, which looked like a glass of water. Took pills, vodka, didn't look unusual. My office was at the end of the hall. No one was watching. Wrote my suicide note, printed it out on the printer, walked to the printer, picked it up. No one would have noticed anything. The most over the top thing I did was I had Braves playoff tickets for the next night, knew they would be popular and didn't want them to go to waste, so I put them up. The funny part of that is I sold them at a profit, and that profit paid the deductible for the special hospital. So when I say you can't see things, I mean you can't see things. But what you can see, and these work, um, what you can see, not returning phone calls, not available for clients, missing deadlines, disappear. This list, if you see this in another attorney, a yellow flag goes up. And if you see them in yourself, and we'll talk more about yourself later. And Mike, put up the next question, please. More about yourself later. Then you need to react. I'm going to give you another war story as I look at the clock. Negative professional outcomes there at the bottom. Tried a case. This was within a year of my attempt, before, not after. Um, and won the case. Had an absolute perfect lawyer case. Impeached every witness with pages of deposition testimony. How good, how on a roll was I? When the courtroom's projector broke down in the middle of my closing, and the judge made a crack about relying too much on these newfangled gadgets, I pulled out from one of my trial bags a backup projector. I mean, everything was going right. Jury came back unanimously against us, told me that I was the best lawyer they've ever seen, but they didn't believe my client. Um, and then all of a sudden, the judge's clerk tapped me on the shoulder and says, Judge Jackson wants to see you. Well, that's never, ever, ever a good sign. And that probably took 3 or 4 days off of my life. Walked back to the judge and he said, Eric, I want to let you know, while they were out deciding liability, we were writing the instructions for damages. You won this case. You absolutely won this case. You were wonderful. But I need you to sit here for 5 minutes and just take a breath and, discharge. He was focused on a lawyer having a negative professional outcome. That was good. So that feeds what it is you can do for your colleagues. For someone close, be there. Which doesn't mean be there and be active. Just sitting in the room, soft touches, a text every day or so matters. Don't try to fix it, just be there. Identify behaviors, not descriptions. You tell someone they're depressed, you're going to get pushback. You point out to someone that they missed golf the last 4 times, they're going to notice that and they can't deny it. Offer real steps, not platitudes. Cross the words, snap out of it. Tomorrow will be a better day, out of your vocabulary in these regards. If you're not close, you can't do these things, but certainly you have a friend in common. Now, what are we doing currently as a bar? This goes somewhat to one of the past questions. We've got 2 things we're doing: lawyer assistance programs and wellness programming. Lawyer assistance programs generally mean we're going to put you in touch with someone. That's not universal. Some are better than others. Wellness programming means meditation, mindfulness, exercise, diet, a number of other things. All of these things are good. The world is better because we have lawyer assistance programs. The world is better because we have wellness programs. But my own view is that we are pitting 2 audiences against each other: the 80% and the 20%. Do these approaches provide adequate guidance to the 20%? Probably not. Rather, they probably make the 20% feel helpless because using these tools doesn't solve the problem. Do they cause the 80% to be suspicious of whether the 20% is working hard enough? I don't know, but I can make an argument for it. But combine the current approach with the fear issue, and we have more people thinking that they are in the 20% and worried about doing other things. Put the results up, please. Yeah, generally a normal distribution. 14% of you says it addressed the need, the same roughly. Call it window dressing. I wasn't sure how that would react. The middle two can address, may or may not. Yeah, this one pretty much hits what I would have expected the answers to be. What can you do for yourself? In addition to the items that I identified before for looking at others, take a look at how people are treating you. Are fewer people interacting with you? Are you focused on things that are just not meaningful? I'm moving a little quickly now because I'm looking at my clock. How do you help yourself? Know yourself. Awareness is the most important thing in the world. I know, or for the most part know, whether I'm spinning. I know what things to look for, and I know how to address them. The biggest change from pre-attempt to post-attempt is knowing that a suicidal thought is not normal and shouldn't be explored. Is knowing that if I wake up at 2 in the morning with the energy to work till the following 2 in the morning, I need to resist that and take a Benadryl maybe, because you shouldn't give in to the mania, except during trial. No kidding. Speak to a professional. Now, when should you speak to a professional? 3 months before you think you should need to speak with a professional. If you think you might have an issue, you want to form a relationship with someone now. Because if you want to next week speak to someone who's on your plan, covers your issue, is relatively close to the house, that person doesn't exist. You want to form that relationship now, get that first appointment, and find a way to keep that relationship going. And yes, exercise, diet, mindfulness, prayer, meditation, and many other things play a role. I'm going to go to the hypotheticals with some amount of speed, because they're good, um, and then go to all the remaining questions, and we'll stay around for 10 minutes after. Hypothetical one, we're going to talk about a lawyer, and we're going to ask a question: is this lawyer a danger? This lawyer was appointed defense counsel in a rape case, pushed a blame the victim defense, single father, not around much, et cetera, et cetera. Defense was unsuccessful. Eventually, his convict was killed by an angry mob. In live audiences, I would say roughly 10% know who this person is. That's Atticus Finch. Now, of course, Atticus is not a danger, but we need to know more about him than just these things. Why you need to examine the whole picture, not just reach a conclusion. Second discussion is the what would you do discussion. It's known that your opponent has psychiatric issues, but is still practicing. Probably gets weak in the afternoon as his meds wear off. You know how to push your opponent's buttons to your client's advantage. Client says, pursue a strategy that will get him $1 million more in settlement. Do you do it? Standard room at this time, 10% of you will say yes, 90% of you will say no. Change the facts a little. Your partner hears what you're thinking about and says, if you don't do it, you've got to write him a check for $333,000 because that money would have gone to the firm. That change your opinion? That one generally doesn't change opinions. You hear the client shopping the case around town and that someone else will take it and get the money. That one changes some opinions, interestingly. But the one that really makes people think is the next one. If you wouldn't do it to begin with, do you generally refuse to beat lawyers when your skills are superior? Meaning you're mentally stronger than the other guy. You're smarter, you're a better advocate, you're quicker. What's the difference between that mental advantage and the mental advantage in this case? That one changes some minds, but it's still usually 60-40 by the end. Don't do this thing. Final hypo, another lawyer. This guy failed the bar 5 times, takes on a murder case at first trial, repeatedly lies to the judge about his legal experience, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't rolling along, not well, but then a late night aha moment reinforces his belief that success occurs regardless of preparation if you are smart enough. About 25% know this guy. Vincent de la Guardia Gambino. Okay, I've said this on LinkedIn. I've said this in discussions. I've said this over and over again. Vinny's got bipolar disorder, and Vinny is a danger. Vinny believes that if he wins in the end, it doesn't matter how he got there, and will keep believing that until he crashes. That's not good. Look, mental health is a real issue, period. It's an issue in our profession, not because the numbers are bad, but because we work in conditions that exacerbate the problem. You can see it in others, you can see it in yourself. Don't give in to the hype. Don't buy into the concept that we're all crazy and we're all going to die. But it's a real world issue, and you really need to be aware of it. Finally, two things. One, langlegal.com, there's a section that says downloads. A lot of the stuff I write is there. Two, not nearly, every time I give one of these, there are any number of people who want to talk personally afterwards. Obviously, I can't do that in the hallway because there is no hallway. There's my email address and there's my phone number. I am more than available to do so. And with that, I'm going to get to the questions.
Oh,
And
hang on a second there, Eric. Before you get to the question, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can go ahead and handle a couple right now. And then those people that want to drop off, they're
right,
welcome to drop off because the survey will come up for them when they drop off. So I'll leave it up to them. But if you
okay,
want, I can just quickly go through the conclusion and basically say, hey, everybody, thank you for attending this webinar and trust that you found it a worthwhile and useful time for you, use of your time, I should say. And Eric, of course, special thanks to you. Powerful message and bringing not only knowledge and guidance to us, but it's a highly sensitive and complex topic, and certainly your passion and personal experience makes it truly, hard hitting and special. And then last thing I'll say is look up for those that are still on, look for the invites to come to our the parts 2 and 3 of the 3-part Science and Art of Negotiation webinar series. The next one being on the 20th of October and then the 17th of November. And once again, the code words are mental and health. So when the survey asks for those, you know what to do. All right, so technically the webinar is concluded. So for those of you who don't want to stay around, you're more than welcome to leave. For those of you who do, Eric's going to handle the questions that have come through during the course of the webinar, and he's going to stay on for any additional questions that could come up.
okay, and please work through the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you.
Not the chat. All right. First one, do we think we should take different steps to assist other attorneys than we would to assist normal human beings? No. And that question is not being answered from an attorney perspective, but rather if you see someone needing help, you should help them. If I've misunderstood the question, I'm sorry, but no, there's no reason to treat an attorney any differently from anyone else who's suffering. All right, next one. Corey Baldwin asks how I am doing these days. Send me an email for the longer answer, but yeah, I'm doing fine. A lot of that has to do with with all those things that happened at once. That means there are fewer things to happen. So next one, if a new attorney told you he has an alcohol problem, I feel I just am out of my league talking about alcohol. But if you changed alcohol to mental health, I think that under rules 5.1 and 5.2 that I quoted, your decision is not based on the problem that they had, but your judgment as to whether they can do the work. I'm not an employment lawyer either, so if I stepped on any FMLA stuff, I'm sorry. Oh, nice things, nice things. All that's left are nice things about me. Let me clear out.
Well, that's always a good thing.
Let me I'm going to look at the chat just to see if there's anything there.
Yeah.
Other substance abuse. Yeah, nothing in the chat that I need to address. If anyone's got any others, let me know. And seriously, email me or call me. What is the one thing that would have made a difference to you on the attempt day? Nothing. Once, I don't ever go into this part. Once the triggering event occurred earlier in the day, I had made my mind up. Now, part of that, I believe, relates to we've got something in our brains that stands in the way of killing ourselves. I had been breaking that down for 40 years by thinking about it every day. And so once I made the decision, um, once I made the decision, there wasn't a turning back. Happy answer. How do you protect yourself if you've disclosed it in an employment situation? It's a good question. If you're there, can you tell me whether you mean protect from others making judgments about you or protect from stigma? I'm not sure what you mean by protect. Waiting for, well, let's assume you mean both judgments and stigmas. Thank you. I think that's a judgment. I made my decision because I don't want to say I had no choice, but I didn't ever want to be in a situation where someone said, "Hey, did you hear about Eric?" Um, and so, yeah, you want to hear about Eric? Google him. Establishing future competence um, depends what your past competence was. Like I said, I was very lucky um, in regard to people still respecting me when it was over. But I came back in 2015. The first cases I got were, $15,000 breach of contract matters. Draft this 2-page agreement to sell this $5,000 piece of equipment. It wasn't until 2 or 3 years after that the cases got bigger and bigger. So I think the people working with you will spoon feed you and you'll prove yourself. No open questions. Give it 10 seconds and then Todd. As in there is a mental crisis and you're better. So it took time. I wouldn't say I'm better. I would say I'm more aware. Um, Renee, reach out to me afterwards. These are good questions and more more set for back and forth on a personal basis.
All right then. Very, very good. Very good.
Todd, is it just you and I here?
No, there's still 131 participants that are here. I don't know how here they are, but they're still connected. But in fact, a couple more questions just came in.
Can you listen to
Can I
this
listen to
again?
this again? Okay, I can handle that. Yeah, we're going to be posting this this webinar on our YouTube channel, and I think that comes through with the survey. Mike, Mike, are you there? Can you address how people can access that?
Should
If
be
you
able
know.
to find it through our website, the Ultra Pro RPG website.
Okay, there you go. ultraprorpg.com and find the YouTube repository for all these webinars that we do, and that's where it'll be. A couple
Cool.
days, give it a day or two.
How do I continue to be so brave? Fear. No, I just I don't want to say there isn't any choice in the matter, but you got to put food on the table. and you got to help others. And I'm trying to repay the confidence that others had in me. I don't know whether it's brave or whether it's the only choice I have on the board. Going once.
Going twice. Sold. Oh, wait, one popped
there
up.
you go.
Hang on.
Seems like I have a good sense of humor. How does that help you in your practice? Geez, there's a predicate there. How does that help you in your practice? Aside from those in our profession who don't have a sense of humor and find it very annoying, I'm in litigation, and I learned early on that getting along with opposing counsel is so incredibly important, that this is just the mode I choose to communicate. And I believe it helps. It also helps to have someone with me to tell me when I'm being too much of a wise ass.
Back to going once. Going twice. Sold.
All right.
All right, Eric, thank you very much. And
all right, give me a call or something for a postmortem. I'm just curious as to how
I
things
will.
went.
I will do that. You bet.
Right,
Thanks. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.